Hello everyone, I'm the Quiet F, and in this video I'm going to be recapping I was reincarnated as the 7th prince so I can take my time perfecting my magical ability. So, without further ado, let's recap. A man is kneeling in front of a group of nobles who mock him as he despairs, knowing what is about to happen. One of the nobles offers him a gift before he dies, and asks him to try casting a spell. In desperation, he casts a tiny fireball, which doesn't even hit the nobleman, provoking laughter from the other. Then the nobleman begins his rich man's speech about how he thinks he's better than everyone else. The most important things for a magician are his lineage, talent, and effort, as the father of magic, William Bordeaux, once said. However, there's no point in making an effort if you don't have talent or lineage. A commoner like that would never be a magician. Then, the nobleman throws a fireball that begins to burn him alive. Despite screaming in pain, inside the commoner thinks it's incredible and is fascinated by the quality of magic that a talented nobleman can cast. His last wish before dying is that he could study and learn more about magic. Finally, his body is consumed by flames. Soon afterwards, however, he opens his eyes and realizes that he's surrounded by women who appear to be giants. He thinks about casting a spell to defend himself and sees that his hands are small, and out of those hands comes a jet of fire that grazes the face of one of the maids and goes through the castle walls. Meanwhile, in the streets, a news agent announces that the 7th prince of the Saloon Kingdom, Prince Lloyd, has been born. The maids are startled by the hole in the wall, but Prince Lloyd seems quite pleased. While life in the kingdom goes on as normal, the maids search for Prince Lloyd as he tries to escape from them. He is found by two nobles and asks them not to tell the maids that he has been there. The nobles call him to hunt, as this is a great pastime for a prince, but Lloyd has already run off. One of the nobles seems to be very interested in him, but the other says it doesn't make much sense, since he's much younger than the other princes and isn't in the running for the throne. But he started talking soon after he was born, read magic books instead of picture books, and refused milk from the breast as if it were an act of chivalry. In addition, the nobleman believes him to be the reincarnation of the great William Bordeaux, the father of magic. Lloyd has indeed been reincarnated, but before that, he was just a normal resident of Salomite. He doesn't know why he kept his memories or how he was reborn as a privileged person, a prince of the royal family. But he doesn't care about any of that. The only thing he wants to do is find out about all the incredible magic the palace possesses. The palace's collection of books is huge, but as soon as he opens one of them, one of the maids, Silpha, finds him. She is his sword teacher, but he doesn't understand why a prince with no chance of ascending to the throne needs sword lessons. Silpha says that, as a member of royalty, it's appropriate that he should know how to handle a sword, and the meaning of her life has become to teach him that, since it's been 3 years since she became his teacher. If Lloyd goes soft, the lesson could last all day, so he fights hard. But Silpha always holds back when fighting him, and besides, he's using control magic to trace her every move. Even though he's cheating, Silpha is much stronger than he is, so he's still at a disadvantage. So he decides to do an experiment, which means he's going to cheat even more. He uses magic to make the sword grow, to increase strength, and to levitate, which makes the fight much more even. And what happens when you fight with a mirror and suddenly make a different move? Lloyd manages to trick Silpha into attacking him because he wants to read again soon, but she defends the blow and asks if he's been cheating all this time. Then she hits him with the sword and wins the fight. She realizes everything he's done to even up the fight, but instead of beating him up, she marvels at how incredible and talented he is, because even court magicians have trouble casting 2 spells at the same time. But he doesn't have to rush to improve quickly, because Silpha will be with him forever. But he actually cast 4 spells at the same time. She didn't notice the physical enhancement and the control magic, but he thinks it's best not to say anything. Then it's bath time. He wants to take a bath by himself, but Silpha doesn't take her hands off him, because she knows he'll get out of the bath and go straight to his books. The other maids, who are also taking a bath, come up to him and tell him that if he doesn't obey, he'll be eaten by the demon from the secret library. Long ago, Saloon was almost destroyed by the demon Grimoire, and several wizards sacrificed themselves to seal it in a book. Silpha asks if this is the demon that is sealed in the forbidden library in the basement of the castle, and says that it's just a story. And even if it were real, there's nothing a sealed demon can do. And Lloyd wouldn't be scared of a little story like that. But he's shaking in her lap, and all the maids are drooling over his cuteness, and they start arguing him because they want him to sleep in their bed so he doesn't get scared. While they're arguing, Lloyd manages to escape and swim away. And he's not scared at all. He's just super excited to find out that there's a secret library in the castle. At night, he finds the entrance to the library, which is protected by 2 guards. He then uses a concealment spell that uses airflow to refract light and make the user invisible. One of the guards yawns and the other asks him not to let his guard down, because supposedly there's a magic in the library that could shake the whole kingdom, as well as the powerful demon that has been sealed inside. But the other guard doubts that there's anyone who can break through their security. Meanwhile, Lloyd breaks through their security and passes through the gate. But the entrance is sealed by an unbreakable barrier made by 10 wizards. And, as you might imagine, Lloyd breaks through the barrier and enters the library. He is delighted, because he has lived there for 10 years and never knew it existed. As he reads, he remembers that he has to put the barrier back up before he can leave. Then, one of the books starts flying around the place, and the seal demon Grimoire appears, surprised that Lloyd has managed to break the barrier. He asks Lloyd to release his seal, because it's only a matter of time before it breaks due to wear and tear. In return, he can give Lloyd as much gold as he wants. But Lloyd realizes that this is weak creation magic, that it was just low quality pebbles with no resistance that turned into gold. And he says he's going to put the seal back on because all his magic depends on Saloon, so he can't put the kingdom in danger. Grimoire tries to convince him by saying that the people he hated died centuries ago, so he won't hurt anyone, but it's no use. Then, as a last resort, he tells Lloyd that he's going to teach him about ancient magic. Magic that was lost hundreds of years ago, because he seems to have a talent for learning about it. And then he hits Lloyd's weak spot, who remembers how he was treated in his past life and says that now he's the perfect person to learn about ancient magic. So he conjures a key and removes the seal that held Grimoire. The demon breaks free, not believing that the boy has really broken the seal. Lloyd asks him to teach him the ancient magic, and he obeys, casting a power towards the prince that destroys everything around him, while Grimoire thinks about what he's going to do now that he's eliminated the prince. But Lloyd created a barrier around him that blocked all the magic. While he analyzed its composition, he asks Grimoire to show him more magic, with a rather strange look on his face, and the demon fires several dark shots, not believing in the strength of the barrier. Lloyd is fascinated by magic and wants to understand it with his own body. It's a bad habit he has, so he sticks his finger out of the barrier and the magic circulates through it, and his finger gets all messed up, but he's still happy to have understood the magic more. Then he asks Grimoire to show him more, and the demon is enraged. He splits into 2 heads and casts an even stronger spell, the Dark Spiral Shot, which mixes 2 different incantations. While the barrier blocks all the power, Lloyd thinks that synchronizing 2 incantations is normally impossible, but Grimoire can use it because he has 2 mouths. But despite this magic is just an advanced version of the shot he had used before. Grimoire doesn't understand how the barrier is still standing, because that was his most powerful magic, and Lloyd imagines that he must have had a lot of fun learning it, because understanding how magic works is the coolest thing in the world. Grimoire can't keep up with the boy's train of thought and tries to run away, but runs into yet another barrier on the way out of the library. Lloyd doesn't want to risk it because the castle is just up ahead, and he has made a mess of things before, so he wanted to avoid it happening again. He has had enough of the demon's magic, and now he wants to see it use defensive magic. So he launches a gigantic fireball, and Grimoire doesn't even have time to react, as the whole inside of the barrier goes up in flames. As he tries to recover from the attack, Lloyd doesn't understand why he didn't defend himself, and he's frightened by the boy's power. He then restores all the damage Grimoire caused to the library. The demon says that Lloyd is the most incredible sorcerer he has ever met, and the boy is also fascinated by him, because he realizes that demons can't be killed by magic. But he says he still feels pain, and Lloyd now wants to know how much he can take. Grimoire finally gives up and pledges his loyalty, asking Lloyd to turn him into a familiar, and the boy sees this as a chance to conduct an experiment. But in this form, Grimoire attracts too much attention, and he asks the demon to turn into something small. So he turns into a cute goat to try and attract Lloyd's attention, who asks him to hide in his clothes. Grimoire is happy, because if he sticks to Lloyd, he can control his mind and occupy his body. But when he sticks, he sees the immense amount of mana the boy has, and realizes that he won't even be able to get close to his mind. He begins to shake with fear and asks Lloyd to call him Grim, thinking that, for the time being, he'd better obey the boy to avoid trouble. Then, after everything has been sorted out, Lloyd finally gets to read. In the castle, Prince Albert is getting ready to start the day. His servants dress him and even apply perfume, and he leaves his room for the library, while several servants bow to him on the way. In the library, where Lloyd is reading, as usual, Grimm warns him that someone is coming, and Lloyd asks him to hide. The prince enters the library and greets his younger brother, who finds it hard to take his eyes off the book to look at him. The two of them go out into the courtyard to practice their invocations, and the objective is to hit various plaques with small fireballs. Albert manages to hit them with ease, and the maids shout their approval. Although Albert is the second prince of Saloum, many say he could be the next king, as he has a good physique and is intelligent. Lloyd is happy to be invited by his brother often, as he can access all the castle spaces, and these are the only opportunities he has to practice his magic. He doesn't care about the throne, and thinks that if he attracts too much attention, people might put him in the line of succession, but he just wants to keep studying and practicing magic. So, instead of aiming for the bullseye, he decides that he's going to barely hit them on purpose. And of course, he succeeds, and one of the employees thinks that although he's talented, he's not that good, and Grimm is annoyed that they didn't notice that he missed on purpose, while Lloyd analyzes the benefits of adding rotation to the fireball, because he uses less mana and has the same effect. Albert decides to take a break and leave his little brother free to play, and he's very happy to have the shooting range to himself. Lloyd wants to try using Grimoire's quick enchantment, but he says it's impossible, because only demons with 2 mouths are capable of it. So, Lloyd stretches out his arm towards Grimm and absorbs the demon into his body, asking him to cast a spell so that the two can synchronize their incantations. However, when the demon begins to recite the spell, Lloyd starts reciting several spells at once, and Grimm is stunned, asking what the hell he's doing. He explains that he's reciting a stack of spells, which is a way of shortening spells that require incantations and reduce their activation time. He was trying to recite 100 spells at the same time. Realizing that Grimm wouldn't be able to keep up, Lloyd decides to try using the mouth on his hand to speak, and discovers that he can. And he also discovers that he can speak using both mouths at the same time. So he asks the demon for permission because he needs to use his mouth, and begins to recite the incantations. He invokes 2 extremely powerful fire spells that are completely different from each other, and begins to combine the 2 into one, and Grimm gets desperate with the boy's power. Lloyd realizes the destructiveness of his double incantation and decides it's best not to release it on the surface, so he launches a huge jet of fire into the sky. Meanwhile, Prince Albert is quietly sipping his tea, and one of the servants asks why he pays so much attention to Prince Lloyd, since he's just a child with some talent for magic. Albert says that the servants don't have eyes for talent. Lloyd's fireball hit all the targets in the same way, and that was on purpose. He's a child prodigy, and maybe one day he'll become the great sage. He just wants to get along with his brother, but the wisdom of the great sage could be very useful for the future king. He thinks that by now, Lloyd must have hit all the targets. One of the servants looks at the window and wonders if the sun has set, because it's dark outside. In fact, this was the result of Lloyd's magic, which opened a huge hole in the sky, exposing the glow of night. Luckily for him, things returned to normal quickly, but Grimm was still unhappy with the boy's magical power. The next day, Lloyd's display of power was already in the papers, and people didn't know if it was a weather event or a bad omen, and even Lloyd panicked for a moment after casting the magic. He saw in the paper the news of a group of A-rank adventurers who had completed a difficult dungeon and found several treasures, and decided to go to a dungeon too, because he would have the chance to find several items with magical power. But he can't leave the castle because the maids will go crazy, so he'll have to use magic to get out. He picks up an acorn and casts a spell from the plant class, the wood replica, which makes the acorn become a perfect replica of him, and not just in appearance. The resin imitates bones and skin, and the roots function as the circulatory system, and the copy can even make some movements on its own. But that wouldn't be enough for him to get out of the castle unnoticed. The big problem was Silpha. The hot maid is so observant that she can see that Lloyd has only grown a few millimeters, so a lookalike who can only dance like an idiot wouldn't be able to fool her. So, to get out of hiding, he put Grimm's mind into the doll's body and the doll's body into his own, splitting the demon's consciousness, and that was enough to fool the maids. Grimm realizes that, now Lloyd isn't around, he can get up to whatever mischief he wants. But his evil thoughts are interrupted when Lloyd says he's happy to have him as a familiar, and that he's counting on him, at which point the demon gets all embarrassed and even cries with emotion, asking him to come back soon. However, Lloyd was only thinking of a way to get out of the castle, and forgot that he didn't know where to to find the dungeon. While he was thinking about this, he sees a girl being chased by orcs up ahead. Suddenly, the girl stopped running and turned in the direction of the orcs, knocking all of them down and finishing with a blast of energy that turned the monsters into pieces of meat. Lloyd realizes that the way she breathes is incredible. Outside of the country, people channel an energy called ki through their bodies by breathing, which allows for incredible techniques, and that's what the girl was doing. She realizes that he was hiding at the top of the mountain and asks who he is. Lloyd wants to go down and ask her about the dungeons, but Grimm says he can't show himself like that, because anyone will know that he's the 7th Prince of Saloon. While they argue, the girl decides that, since he hasn't answered, he's an enemy, and starts climbing the mountain at an absurd speed. When she gets to the top, Lloyd has already used a transformation spell that imitates someone he knows, something he learned from Grimm. He then uses it to mix his appearance with that of his brother Albert, and create something completely new. He introduces himself to the girl as Robert, a novice adventurer. The girl turns around and introduces herself as Tao, a B-rank adventurer and martial artist. She is enchanted by the boy's beauty. After 18 years of training, she left her dojo hoping to meet someone. But she was never popular with the boys, who only went for delicate maidens. But it seems her chance has finally come, and she's determined to date Robert. Lloyd starts to leave because he figures she's too busy to explore dungeons with him, but she readily accepts his invitation. They enter the dungeon and Tao beats up the monsters to try and impress Lloyd, but he was too busy collecting shiny stones to see her fight. Afterwards, she says she's adventuring alone because she hasn't found any decent companion, but what she really wanted was a boyfriend. Lloyd asks if what she used to fight was ki, and she's impressed that he knows it, since few people on that continent do. He says that ki works in a similar way to mana in magic, and that breathing is apparently important. Tao says that ki training begins and ends with breathing. It's with breathing that you make the ki circulate, allowing for an unusual increase in power, and it takes a lot of practice even to be able to feel the ki in your body. While she's talking, Lloyd starts practicing his breathing. Tao tries to get through to him but realizes that he's concentrated on his breathing, and he begins to feel the ki. But suddenly, he feels a pain in his lung and has to stop. The girl is impressed that he was able to imitate her breathing just by looking at her, but says that trying to use ki breathing without being used to it makes your lungs hurt like they're on fire. Lloyd was able to feel an energy in his body separate from the mana, and thinks that this would be very useful in his magic practices. Tao offers to teach him more about ki, since he's so interested, and his thanks are enough to make the girl melt, and she tries to hide it by telling him to hold his breath until they leave the dungeon. Meanwhile, in the body of his double, Grimm thinks that Lloyd is a very strange boy. Despite his good life, he doesn't care about any of it, and is only interested in researching magic. Then, Sylpha appears in the room and says she's finally found him, and it looks like the disguise has worked for her too. In the dungeon, Tao defeated the boss, a grey wolf, with a burst of ki, and now they could open the treasure chest. But it shouldn't have much of value since the dungeon was pretty weak. Lloyd finds it strange that a chest can only be opened once the boss has been defeated, but at the same time, he's fascinated by it. Tao notices that he's more interested in the chest than what's inside, and sees that he's improved his breathing a lot. She thinks she has found a match, and maybe even her family will approve of him as a boyfriend. She starts to open the trunk, but Lloyd notices something coming out of it and pulls her out of the way, just as a black energy cuts through the air where she was standing. A hooded skeleton comes out from under the chest, and Tao says it's a lich, probably the real boss of the dungeon. Tao is scared, but she tells Robert that he shouldn't worry about it, and he can even leave the dungeon already. Robert says he wants to watch, but Tao comes close to him and uses her ki to send him flying away, apologizing, so he doesn't die to the lich. The monster begins his attack. Tao doesn't understand how a low-level dungeon has a monster like a lich as its boss, since even rank A adventurers have trouble against it. But she needs to buy time so Robert can escape. While he flies away, protected by his magic, he wonders why Tao kicked him away. He wanted to know more about Ki and the dungeon, and he's not sure he should come back. When he asks Grimm, the demon seems weak and begs him to go back home. Tao is still fighting, but she can only avoid the lich's attacks, and she thinks she's gonna die. But at least Robert got away. The lich starts talking, saying that the key techniques she uses are just a lower form of magic. He ate many adventurers before and took their powers, but Tao is not worth eating. He's not interested in her skills. He's more interested in Robert, because he managed to avoid his attack. Tao says they are nothing alike. Even though they both value knowledge, she thinks Robert could find something interesting about anything, even a pebble on the road. Most people in the continent don't care at all about key techniques, but he said he was impressed. She gathers her breath and attacks, but the lich puts up a barrier. She's been training since she was 5, not doing anything else, just training. So a barrier like that is nothing. She manages to break it with a powerful close hit, but now she's out of breath and can't move. However, the lich is still intact. The full power of her key art is not worth a finger of his magic. When the lich releases his final blow, Robert shows up and blocks it. He's disappointed at Tao for giving up already and takes over the fight, but he's in a hurry, so he's gonna make it quick. He's combining mana and ki to cast his spells, so he doesn't need incantations. He flies through the dungeon with a barrier up while concentrating on his breath, and the lich can't hit him. The barrier gets in the way of the airflow, so he releases it. The lich thinks it broke and launches more attacks, but Robert avoids all of them while he breathes. He molds ki and mana together and launches a magic disc that breaks the monster's spells. He needs something more powerful, so he launches many more magic discs, each one thinner and faster than the last, until the lich can't block them anymore. Finally, he manages to break the lich's barrier and slice him in half. They loot the chest and the only thing in there is an old knife. Robert thinks it might be bathed in mana, so he takes it. The chest is swallowed by the earth, and Tao says that once the chest is looted, it buries itself and the dungeon collapses. Robert realizes the chest is like the core of the dungeon. It builds a dungeon around it and absorbs items dropped by adventurers who couldn't beat it. And when the dungeon is beat, the chest offers one of its items to the winner and destroys the dungeon so he can flee and rebuild it later. The dungeon is falling apart as Robert mumbles and tries to remove the chest, but he manages to do it and escape right before the dungeon closes. Tao asks why Robert fought using ki, wondering if it was for her sake, but he says it was only for fun. He has to rush home, and Tao explains that the technique he used to kill the lich was a keyblade, a secret technique that she can't even use herself. She says she's gonna train and become an interesting girl, so that she'll be the kind of girl who can catch his attention one day. Robert, now Lloyd, gets home to see Grim on the floor full of bruises. It was all the result of sword training with Silpha, because he obviously couldn't keep up with her. Grim can't believe he was late because of an old knife, and he apologizes again, but he says it's quite a treasure. He baits it in hot water and scrapes out the mana essence on it. Mana essence is the catalyst used to enchant weapons with magic formulas in order to strengthen them, and that knife was enchanted with boost power. But enchanting weapons is hard. If one thing goes wrong, you can lose both the essence and the weapon. He uses the spell on the knife to make mana essence. It's something hard to find, so he analyzes it to make more himself. He uses purifying magic to separate the elements of the essence, which are oil, silver, and hematite, a rare element got from powdering monsters' cores. He has the core of the dungeon with him, so it might work. Now all he needs is oil, silver, and a lot of weapons. Since he's a prince, he can get all the silver he wants from his father, who wonders what he's gonna buy with that money while he melts it all in a cauldron. He fights with Silpha because she promised to give him oil if he wins, but he loses to her again. She still gives him the oil because his poor fighting skills the other day, which were actually Grimm's fighting skills, were just a fluke, and now he's back to normal. Silpha is sure he can become a knight or even a sword master when he grows up. Now that he has all the ingredients, he starts making the mana essence. All he needs now is swords, so he asks Albert for them. Lloyd explains everything to his brother, and his loyal guards have no choice but to give him their swords, knowing that they might not get them back. Grim is eager to show the guards that Lloyd can do it, so they begin the enchantment. He fills every single inch of the sword with spells, but the steel can't handle it and shatters. He does it again and again and again, until he's out of swords. Out of 120 weapons, he was able to enchant 50 of them. He apologizes for losing the other 70, but Albert is astonished. A first-rate enchanter has a success rate of around 10%, so what Lloyd did is unbelievable. The guards are sure that Lloyd is lying, but when one of them puts his sword down, it slices through the sheath. Lloyd wants to see the swords tested in battle, so Albert invites him to a task their father requested, a monster hunt. Well, that was the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye!